What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Gen B podcast. So, there's been a lot going on with Bitcoin the past, let's just call it honestly, 5 days. So, we were planning on filming an episode regardless, but this is kind of an emergency podcast episode. It's right now Sunday, March 2nd, around 3:30 p.m. Bitcoin's price, for those that are new, it's been, like we've said in previous episodes, very volatile the past week in both directions. So, we wanted to talk about what we thought the reason was behind that and just our thoughts and opinions on the short-term future of what's been going on. And we'll go from there. Was there anything you wanted to add, David, before we got into it?
No, let's just get into it. I just threw the Bitcoin chart for the last week onto the screen. So we went from at 7 days ago, I guess, 96K all the way down to 78K 2 days ago on the 28th. And now we're back up at 94. So yeah, super volatile. It's funny how quick this can move. There was a lot of panic as we were dropping into the 80s, like low 80s a few days back, and then all the way down to 78, like we're saying. So I think the fear and greed index, which is just like a thing people use to track the kind of people's sentiment towards crypto, was at a 10 out of 100. And it was like the lowest we've seen since COVID. And I think both you and I were like, what is going on? Like, the things aren't as bad as COVID right now in terms of investing. Like, I think it got even worse than when the FTX collapse was happening, and like sentiment was really bad with that a couple years ago. So I don't know. I was a little confused why we were reacting so negatively. So maybe we can talk like why we think it trended down in the first 5 days of the last week, and then what's happened really today.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely just wild, the price swings to go from 96 that I mean, it was literally at 78,000 2 days ago. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and for it to already be back at what's it at 90
94.
94. I mean, um yeah, it felt a little manufactured when it dropped down to the 70s, the high 70s. It just didn't make, like you said, it didn't make much sense. Obviously there was more news about tariffs, but and I guess the powers that be who really make these prices swing, whether it's whales or exchange, who knows what goes on behind the scenes.
BlackRock.
Right. But their whole goal really is to just, they want to scare you out. And, they take these news of tariffs and it's warranted, there's uncertainty, but they take advantage of that. So they scare you out. People sell when it hits the high 70s because they're like, I don't know how low this is going to go. And then you get an announcement today, and let's just get into it. For those that have not been following what's been going on with Bitcoin, and I guess crypto for this matter, is this morning, Donald Trump, he put out a post on, I guess it was Truth Social, not X, but put out a post saying that,
Not that. That's Zelensky news. I'm trying to find it.
yeah, that was entertaining as well. The post essentially said, as David tries to find it, he's going to start a strategic reserve. He originally said Bitcoin was not included. He originally said that he wanted America to start a strategic reserve with XRP, Solana, and Cardano. And it's funny because I saw that tweet in real time. It was it was like 10, 11 a.m. And I saw it happen in real time. And I'm like, this guy really not going to include Bitcoin in this? Like, that's a joke. And then 10 minutes later or so, he responds to that original post with his own saying, obviously Bitcoin and ETH, will be at the heart of the reserve. I also love Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I'm just like laughing to myself seeing this happen in real time, because I'm like, you just know that obviously someone crafted the original tweet for him or the original post for him and said, all right, like, this is what you're going to put out. And then there was an outcry on social media when Bitcoin wasn't included. People were like, how are you not going to include the only one that matters, truthfully? How are you not going to include that? And you know that someone on his team went to President Trump, was like, President, there's quite a bit of outcry on social media that you didn't include Bitcoin. And he goes, all right, fine, I'll respond if that's what's going to make them happy. And that's when he put out that next one. And then this whole announcement caused it to go from, literally, it was at 80, the 80s, the mid 80s to start the morning, to shooting up to about 94 just off that announcement.
There you go. Literally within the last, I don't know what time zone this is, maybe my own. Yeah, this is Pacific time. So 7:20 a.m. it was at 85. We're around 12:30 p.m. and it's at 94. So literally a $9,000 gain in 5 hours.
Well, David, what do you make of kind of just this news of his post that he made and this strategic reserve? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
I think going back a little more, like, I do think there's something to what you're saying of market makers, whether that be whales, BlackRock, whoever is involved with like big money in this. There was a lot of speculation as we were going down to 78 that this was, to your point, just those groups trying to like scare retail investors off and make them think it's going to go lower. So especially now seeing this announcement, I could totally see that. They probably had some inside information saying like, hey, this is going to be announced in the next few days. Like, I don't know how that works in terms of manipulating price down, but they have the power to do that. That's why they're called market makers. So I'm sure there was some level of like, let's dip this thing, get it to a price that's lower and like buy more because we know this is coming in a couple days. So this pump at 7:30 a.m., I doubt BlackRock or any of those people were involved in it. They were involved when it was at 85 down to 78, probably buying that whole way down. And then 3 days later, 2 days later, here comes retail when the actual announcement's there. So I think first, that's like a really clear example why you don't trade this. Like, there's good chance people were trading this and were selling at like the mid to low 80s, and now price is at 93. So they just lost a ton of money. Yeah, you never know how low it's going to dip, right? But not financial advice. I think it's always a good time to buy Bitcoin is how I view it, because I can take a currency in the US dollar that's being inflated, that's losing its value, and buy an asset that is doing nothing but gaining in value and is scarce. So why would I not make that trade really at any price if like that trend is going to continue to happen and history has showed us like it is happening? That's my first point of view in terms of price.
Right. Well, you've said it before. If you're going to get into Bitcoin, you need to have the mindset of holding for at least 4 years. You should be holding,
Mm-hmm.
just because that's the halving cycles, and that's typically the amount of time where you see these significant run-ups in price. So again, if you're in it for the long haul, which you should be, this price action, when you saw it dip to 70, you should have, essentially been unfazed by it, where it's like, wow, okay, well.
Well, and it is such a mindset shift. Like, we put a tweet out this week that was, everyone loves a sale until it's the most like scarce asset in existence. Like, it's just weird how psychology ties into all of this, where literally if a TV goes 25% off, or I don't know, steak at your local grocery store, whatever it is, people are like, oh, nice, let's run over there and buy maybe more than we normally would because it's cheap. That's not what happens with assets. Like, people freak out, and just market psychology is weird. And I mean, there's that famous saying, I don't know who said it, where it's like, you basically buy when people are scared and sell when people are like euphoric. And I mean, I think there's truth to that. So it's scary to do. It feels weird. Like, even at 78, like, I was feeling a little uncomfortable. do I buy? Do I not? Is it going to go lower? Like those thoughts stick in your head. But when you have conviction in the long-term growth of this, like we expect this is going to go a lot higher in terms of US dollars, to the point that like even if it's 100K, 110K, in the long run, that's going to seem like a blip of where like a lot of people think this could potentially go.
Yeah, for sure. To get into, if it's all right, going into the strategic reserve itself that he
Hmm.
announced.
Yeah.
So give I want to give my thoughts real quick, and I'm going to preface it with I don't know much about XRP or Cardano or Solana. I don't know their properties. I don't really know what their use cases are. I should, probably do research, but again, I don't really care about them. I would imagine that, I guess, let me backtrack. The majority of Bitcoiners, I think, are a bit torn on the news from today, because on the one hand, and we've talked about it this morning, David, where it's like, on the one hand, it's a step in the right direction because this strategic reserve has been talked about for a while now, and it was talked about as just Bitcoin, but anything that has to do with the US potentially owning, and now looks like owning Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin, is great. A really good just a really good strategy for the long run. Um, but to couple these other coins in with Bitcoin, I think leaves a lot of Bitcoiners feeling a bit, just honestly, like pissed off, because again, don't know much about these other coins, but what I do know about them is that they, one, or were made by they were produced by I guess a person, an entity, like a known group of people, like have started this. Do you have much knowledge on this? Any of these coins?
Yeah, I think where you're going is like the fundamentals, which we've talked about, which is the reason we're so into Bitcoin is really it starts with comparing to the US dollar and like traditional assets like real estate, gold, stocks, where the two things that I think really stand out to us, and there are more past this that make Bitcoin beneficial, it's like true scarcity. There's only 21 million that can ever exist. That's backed up by code and a network of individuals via computers. So it's completely decentralized. There's not that central group that you're talking about or individual who can change the supply or rules of the system or anything, which I think is the case with a lot of these other coins. Again, I don't know a ton about it either. Like I kind of stay in my lane when it comes to Bitcoin, but everything I've heard is like those other cryptos are not decentralized in the same way and are not scarce in the same way that Bitcoin is. And again, you compare Bitcoin to stocks, like those aren't decentralized either. There's boards of directors, there's CEOs, there are people who have outsized impact on the market relating to that coin, or sorry, that asset. So our point of view is, why would I buy something as a savings vehicle that can basically be manipulated by an individual or a group of people? That puts me at risk and like makes me trust this individual or group of individuals, which I don't have to do with Bitcoin. Like that's, I think, one of the biggest things is like, you don't have to trust anyone with Bitcoin. I'm trusting a network of people, and this network of people is going to make the decisions that are best for them, but it's a conglomerate that's making a decision. It's not a small group that can just sway things to the way that are going to benefit them as individuals. So I think the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized makes it so that you're not just trusting one person, and kind of hard to explain. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but it's the lack of trust factor that I think really goes a long way, and nothing else that's out there has that, including traditional assets.
Yeah, yeah. And part of me thinks, like, maybe obviously Trump is very much like US. He wants things to be US made. He wants things to come back to the, like, he wants, that's his whole platform, just like US first. And, you know, Cardano, XRP, and I didn't know much about Solana. I just Googled Solana, but it seems like they were all like, let's just say, invented in the US. And I'm sure from his point of view, he's like, and his team's point of view that are involved with crypto, I'm sure they're sitting there saying, you know, we want to be the leaders in this, and we want these American companies to probably benefit from it, if I had to guess. And so they're like, all right, these three seem to be.
Well, there was a rumor that they were not going to tax US made crypto. So, yeah, I mean, it's totally in line with the whole America First agenda.
Because think about it too, obviously with a strategic reserve, it creates obviously a little bit of legitimacy for these other coins. And so I'm sure the way it was pitched to Trump and his team, I'm sure it's like, listen, if this happens, because the what's his name, Garlinghouse or something, whoever's the CEO of
XRP.
Ripple or XRP, whatever,
Yeah.
he's a big
Yeah.
lobbyist, and I'm sure he's saying, listen, we're gonna if this gets done, we'll hire more people we'll hire people in the US to continue building out the XR people. You know what I mean? Whatever it is. And I'm sure that perked up the ears of Trump, and I'm sure that's part of it, where, yeah, that's my guess, is that these are US made, and he's like, all right, like, let's make sure that they're here and we show support for them. But
when we started diving in, or go ahead.
No, what were you going to say?
Like, we started diving into the why of the strategic reserve as well. And I don't know if you want to give your 2 cents. Like, I have opinions on it, but
yeah, you go first. You talk about it.
I did a little digging into this, or just like thinking about it. And I guess it starts with a gold reserve. We started with a gold reserve, which was backing our dollar. So like the dollar was directly tied to gold. 1971, we moved away from that, where we said the dollar is no longer tied to gold. So it was then free floating, had like no tie to any asset or oil or whatever else in the real world, but we still hold gold. And the question is, well, if the dollar's not tied to it, why do we still value this asset? And to me, the only thing I can think is that it's a hedge against the fiat currency system. It's a safety net, an insurance policy for if our fiat currency fails, we have a backup for whatever the new world is going to be after that. Because otherwise, what's the point? If the dollar is all powerful and you have complete control as the US over the dollar, why even hold gold at that point versus, I don't know, I don't even know what you would do, but I think it's a hedge. And so that's all I can think the point of this is as well, is this is another alternative asset as we move into the digital age. And obviously this like total market cap of crypto continues to grow. They probably just view it as another hedge, like either to like protect themselves against the dollar failing, or I think your point of view, it's like, yeah, we'll just make more dollars and maybe use that to pay off debt or something.
Right. Well, I think the biggest thing too with gold is obviously gold is there's scarcity to it, which is why the US owns it in the first, like why they have a reserve of it in the first place, which goes back to why have a reserve of anything else other than Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the scarcest asset and these other coins have no really scarcity to them. What value does having a reserve of them, on, I think it's March 7th. So I think that's Friday, but David Sachs, the person who's in charge of crypto and AI, he's overseeing it on behalf of the US. There's some event that's going on where he actually tweeted out that he's going to be talking more about, I believe, this at that event. And I'm sure we're going to hear news about it when that happens. I think that's the biggest thing. I'm really curious to hear what the strategy is with these. Is it going to be like they own like very small percentages of these other coins and the rest is going to be a majority Bitcoin? Is Bitcoin going to be in its own? Who knows? Like, it'll be interesting to see what the announcement is on March 7th, just as to what they're thinking about moving forward with these. This was an impactful announcement. I mean, everyone kind of knew it was coming in terms of just like, people assumed it was going to be a Bitcoin strategic reserve announcement, but yeah, there's massive implications with whatever they're going to move forward with because, and just talking out loud about it, I don't know if this is going to make much sense, but just thinking about like silver and gold, right? Back in like, when did silver become so it looks like silver, the government started purchasing silver and issuing silver certificates in 1934. If you ask the majority of people, what would you rather have, silver or gold? I think the majority of people would say gold. Like, I'd rather own
Hmm.
gold than silver. I feel like this is kind of what's going to end up happening with these other coins in Bitcoin, where it's like there's going to be a king and it's going to be Bitcoin at the end of the day. That's the foundation. And these other coins are going to be secondary to them. And I'm newer to Bitcoin than most OGs and people that have been in the space. Um, and there seems to be this like hostility, obviously, towards these other coins because it's like, which, you know, I do believe is deservingly so, just because what makes those coins.
I think the delivery is wrong though, and we've talked about this, and I've talked about it with my girlfriend who's not really into all of this, but obviously hears me rant about it here and there. The whole point of what we're trying to do on this podcast is normalize Bitcoin, like connect the dots for everyday people on why Bitcoin is something worth learning about. We're not saying you have to buy it. We never will say that because that's financial advice and we don't want to get in trouble. But it's just like giving you the information on like what makes Bitcoin different and like what problems is it solving in the world. With what you're saying, there's a lot of hostility towards, they call them shit coins. Like anything that isn't Bitcoin is referred to as a shit coin. I think that right there is an example of like that could turn some people off. It's like, oh, these Bitcoiners are like, they call them toxic Bitcoin maximalists. Like they can be viewed as hostile, as toxic, whatever like negative word you want to have. Like there's a lot of that in the space. And to your point, I think the intention is warranted. And I think where it comes from is exactly what we're talking about. They see the properties of Bitcoin and what makes it so valuable. And then we look at these other cryptocurrencies that don't have the same properties and therefore by association, like shouldn't be viewed as valuable. So I don't know what it is about the general like Bitcoin influencer population, but like they do come off as hostile. And again, I think it comes from a good place, but I don't think that's the way to reach as many people. Like ultimately, if you want to buy XRP, Sol, whatever, like be our guest. Like we're both saying, we don't know enough about these because we've made the decision that Bitcoin is what we're focusing on for very specific reasons. And it's almost a waste of our time to try to learn about these when we do a high level like overview and all of them are either centralized or don't have true scarcity. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I also think Bitcoin's the easiest to wrap your head around in terms of like why it's valuable. The things that I've heard, let's just take XRP for example, the things that I've heard as to why it's valuable is because of the fact that I guess it's fast, like in terms of doing transactions overseas, it's like it could be a faster, more efficient way and cheaper way for banks to potentially being able to, or people, like I don't know 100%, but I guess the point is like I see how that can solve a problem for like people sending transactions, but again, like the reason Bitcoin is valuable is because of the fact that there's only 21 million that will ever exist. Um, and it's decentral. Like those are the two most important factors that they solve a problem, which is the fact that our money's broken and um,
Well, our money doesn't have those characteristics, right? It's centralized and not scarce.
right. And it's like, what problems does it solve? Like at least with for people that don't understand crypto, please like we want to be enlightened. Like what are these other like? And I don't think they have an answer. Like I even saw on I think I saw Peter Schiff, who is the biggest gold bug of all time. I mean, he's so anti-Bitcoin. Like, any chance he can shit on Bitcoin, he will. And today
Hmm.
he actually put out a tweet. Do you mind pulling up his tweet real quick? Because I think this is a really good example of kind of what I'm kind of referring to here. So he says something about is that it? Can you click on, is it about,
Is it the Bitcoin?
is there a way to zoom in on that? What he talks about why include XRP in this?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he
Oh, that's
says,
interesting.
so
Yeah.
sorry, I'll just read it real quick. It says, I get the rationale for a Bitcoin reserve. I don't agree with it, but I get it. We have a gold reserve. Bitcoin is digital gold, which is better than analog gold. So let's create a Bitcoin reserve too. What's the rationale for an XRP reserve? Question mark. Why the hell would we want that? Or why the hell would we need that? And when he tweeted that, people were just like, am I living in a simulation? Because this guy,
Peter, this is the best tweet you've ever written.
to be clear for people that don't know Peter Schiff, this guy, since Bitcoin's inception, so this is going on at least 15 years, there's been no one that's been more anti-Bitcoin than this guy. And I mean, just like, he is the face of anti-Bitcoin. And for him to say this, it's just kind of like, first off, whoa, like, interesting. But if you scroll down, which I thought was a very interesting, I think Charles Hawkinson responded to this tweet.
Responded.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. There it is. Charles Hawkinson right there. So Charles Hawkinson, for people that don't know, he created Cardano, which is ADA, which is a part of this strategic reserve now. He created it. He also co-founded Ethereum, whatever. So he responded to Peter Schiff's tweet and said, because XRP is great technology, a global standard, survived for a decade through many harsh cycles, and has one of the strongest communities. Like, and then he says, I think the president made the right decision. First off, so you're telling me just the fact that something survived a decade of harsh cycles, that's a reason to own it in a strategic reserve? And then also because it has a strong community? Like, what? Like,
Well, dude, that's what NFTs were all built on. We have the best community. You got to look for one with like the strong community. And before I forget, like I've seen this described about Bitcoin a lot. Bitcoin solves something major. Like we already said, it's decentralized and scarce. Done. Period. Right? Like that is what it does. That's already been solved for. So any new crypto coming into the market can't compete with Bitcoin when it comes to that. So they have to find other things that they're, quote, better at than Bitcoin. And that's what they're marketing. Like Ethereum for the longest time was, what they call it? It was like some internet thing, like smart contracts. Like it was just like a different use case than what Bitcoin was. And to your point, XRP, oh, it's the entire banking system's going to be built on this, which I'm also like, why, to your point, but we don't fully understand it, and that's fine. So I don't know. It seems more like, because we've seen a lot of comments that like Bitcoin's old, it doesn't do anything. People want crypto coins that have utility, whatever utility means. I don't see a lot of arguments that are like really explaining the value for their crypto that they're supportive of versus just like shitting on Bitcoin for being old and slow, which is one, being old. I don't get how that's a diss. That means it's lasted this entire time successfully. So that doesn't make sense to me. Slow, yeah, but that's like part of the nature of what Bitcoin is. Like it's slow for a reason, which like we would have to do a whole podcast on that. It's like technical, but basically their arguments don't hold up as like, this is why Bitcoin sucks and this other thing's good.
yeah, but again, yeah, we don't know, or I don't know enough about it, but who knows? Something that sticks in the back of my head is I was watching the movie Too Big to Fail on HBO the other day, and that's about the 2008 financial crisis, and it's a really
Ooh, I'm gonna
interesting.
have to watch that.
Yeah, it's you know, just a movie about what went on during that financial crisis. And so the guy who played Henry Paulson, who was at the time the Treasury Secretary during the financial crisis, who he basically was calling all the shots in terms of what to do when shit was hitting the fan. And in the movie, he talked about how, so at when it started, he bailed out, was it Bears? He bailed out some big bank, but that was like the first of many banks to fail. But like
Mhm.
things started to crater, and he was like, in the movie, he was like, I'm not bailing out these other banks. Like it can't seem like the government is like here to prop up the system. Like things need to play out the way but in the movie, and I'm sure in real life, he didn't understand the bad things we're gonna get. He just like so I guess the reason I bring that up is because it just made me realize that these government officials are just as much thinking about how it will look to the public as it like regardless of if it's good or bad for like actually for people, meaning like, and so I
Mhm.
bring that up because when it comes to putting these other coins in this reserve, for all we know, behind the scenes, they're sitting there saying, maybe they don't want to show this affinity for Bitcoin only. And they like, or maybe it's part of a bigger strategy of, we are very bullish on Bitcoin and Bitcoin only, but let's do something with these other coins because maybe we can short term find maybe it's a bait and switch for all we know, where it's like, all right, we want other governments to think that we're like not as into, who knows? But I guess until there's like a true argument in terms of like why we should have a strategic reserve, like if you're going to sit here and tell us about, why XRP and Cardano and Solana have a use case, I'm for that. But to sit here and say we should have a strategic reserve for them, like I want to hear and again, hopefully in this is when David Sachs is having this event on March 7th, hopefully he can provide some insight because I think and Peter Schiff posed the question, like, why do we need a strategic reserve of like, okay, I hear your use case for it, but why do we need a strategic reserve? It's not, usually you want a strategic reserve of something because it's scarce. Like
Mhm.
that's why had gold all these years. Why is this included in the reserve? But sorry, I was ranting there for a while.
No,
So
that was really good. I didn't even think about that. Like that's probably all it is political will. It's like I need to keep donors and voters happy who voted for me and were pro crypto because Trump's been saying this since the Bitcoin conference. I watched his Bitcoin conference presentation or whatever live, and he was already throwing crypto out there every other word. And I was surprised, honestly, how much Bitcoiners got behind what he was saying because it was so opposite of like what so many Bitcoiners are about, where like so many Bitcoiners are Bitcoin only, like we've been saying, and again, very hostile about it. But when Trump's throwing crypto up there every other word, like I didn't see a lot of people being upset about it. I'm surprisingly seeing more people upset about it today. I haven't looked at it much online, like on X, but I'm like, what did you expect? He was already saying it from the get-go. Like the entire time there's been discussion, he's included other cryptos in it. So this was I'm honestly surprised that this is even happening. I thought we were trending more likely towards there wouldn't be a Bitcoin reserve either, rather than including these other cryptos in there. So yeah, it's probably just political will.
big
Like we're saying,
donors.
there's central entities that control these other coins who probably donated a ton to his campaign. I think Brad Garlinghouse of XRP donated a shit ton of money this cycle, not just to the president, like to Congress people and whatnot as well. So yeah, it was money talks. Like there was a lot of talk after the election, like crypto had a big influence in how people voted. And I guess now we'll see how it plays out. Like that's always, I think, how I look at it is, I mean, history has historically shown like these other cryptos, really any other asset tends to trend down over a long enough time horizon compared to Bitcoin. They say everything eventually goes to zero against Bitcoin. I think that's probably going to happen with these coins over time. And I guess depending on what the split of this reserve is, like we'll see how much money is actually made if that's the end goal. Because if you have equal parts of all, you have 5 coins in there and 4 of them are losing against Bitcoin. Are you really going to make money?
Right. Yeah. it's gonna be interesting.
And sorry, real quick, I don't like, as I say that, I don't know that it is about making money because we can just print dollars. So I'm still honestly a little confused why these other coins are included. And like you said, maybe we'll hear more on Friday. It just, I can't find a reason for it,
I think it's
minus political will.
I think it's all political. I think it's everything you just touched on. I think the reason that part of the reason why these other coins are involved in this reserve is, big donors of these coins and, other like it's just a lot of shit behind the scenes that I'm sure that is going on. Like,
One thing I did want to touch on, more so specific to Bitcoin, what happens now on like an international level that this is like being announced, because you already have somebody like El Salvador who's been buying for years, but they're not a big enough player to like really incentivize a lot of people to do it, to buy Bitcoin. But
well,
I don't know, just like at a nation state level, how does this expedite adoption?
right. Well, as we're talking about this, I mean, let's just think about with having these other coins in there. Now, all of a sudden, are these other countries going to start wanting to buy these, let's call it US made coins as well? Like, and then all of a sudden, I mean, let's be real too. There's a ton of people on Trump's team, including his sons, that have been pumping crypto during the election process and that I'm sure benefit for, like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of, I'm sure, inner bullshit that's going to happen. But yeah,
Yeah,
if they,
pump their own bags probably as part of it too.
right, pump their own bags and truthfully, it could be a way that, I don't know how a reserve, like, if you can just sell, like, once something's in a reserve, can you just sell it at will? Like, is there a process that needs to be had in order to sell it, or is a reserve there to hold forever? Like, what is
Well, and
the,
I don't even know the legitimacy of this reserve. Like I was asking ChatGPT about it, or maybe somebody posted a Grok post, like for things that relate to like spending money, Congress has to be involved. So I don't know just because he signs an executive order on this that it just happens.
yeah,
So a
yeah,
lot of unknowns still.
right. I mean, I'm sure that'll be another thing that will cause the price to go down. You'll see that there'll be rumors that Congress isn't going to allow for the executive order to be passed, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden people are going to start selling their, like, it's, listen, in the long run, again, you're gonna want to own the scarcest asset out of, like if you're gonna start a crypto, and this is not financial advice, but just thinking from like, if you're gonna start a crypto portfolio, you're gonna treat it the same as you would a stock portfolio, which is you start it with, you want your blue chips to kind of just be the foundation more or less for you, like, your Apples, your Amazons, your, Fang, whatever or Magnificent Seven, whatever you want to call it. I
Mhm.
mean, the truth is, when it comes to crypto, there's one foundational crypto that's king, and it's Bitcoin, and that is not even an argument. That is fact, literal fact. Like, in terms of just data, there is only one that has been the most successful up until this point. Now you could sit there and say, well, things could change in the next 10 years. Like, again, going back to the properties that Bitcoin has versus the others, are you going to put your money behind the one that is truthfully just scarce or not scarce? Like, forget decentralization, but like when it comes to anything that, any type of asset you want, if it's scarce, you're going to want the one that's
Well,
more
sorry.
scarce.
And I should say decentralization is what confirms the scarcity. So decentralization is just
True.
important. I get your point,
Yeah.
but without the decentralization, the scarcity doesn't remain.
Very good point. Yeah. See, that's why you're the vet. You're the AI, or the AI vet. You're the you're the Bitcoin vet, and I'm
No, no, but I
I'm
get
the
your point.
grasshopper.
I think it's just important for people to know that like it's the combination of those two that make Bitcoin what it is. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, the nation state adoption, like I think it's nation state adoption I'm curious about, but also at the state level, because we've seen a lot about like states in the United States looking into Bitcoin reserves for themselves. I haven't seen discussion of crypto in that. Like, I think everything I've seen related to that has been Bitcoin only. So it's just gonna be interesting as it plays out. Ultimately, like, we're clear on our point of view. I think my summary of this announcement is it's probably a net positive for Bitcoin. I mean, we're seeing it in price. Like, the market obviously liked it. I also don't love that these other coins are in there, but I don't think that matters in the long run. I'm not losing sleep at night over those. If you own these other coins, my recommendation would be learn about Bitcoin. Like, to Evan's point, that's probably like the foundational crypto asset. So if it were me and I wanted to own these other crypto coins to try to get better returns than Bitcoin, I would make sure I held a little bit of Bitcoin as well.
For sure. And I think that just about wraps it up. We'll see what happens March 7th after this crypto event that's going to take place. The plan will be to have another episode following that. So yeah, just continue doing your homework. Hopefully what we've talked about here will hopefully provide some education and just, yeah, we'll hopefully get some more clarity as things progress.
And remember, the pump is nice. Enjoy the pump, but you got to think longer term. Like, we just saw in a week, it literally did a U. So you never know when that U is going to go back down and even higher. Just expand your time horizon because you'll feel a lot better emotionally too.
Right. And sorry, real quick, if you just think about someone that was like, got in a month ago, was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to buy when it's at start of the month, okay. And then you see a freaking, about a $20,000 drop. You're like, if you're new to this, you're sitting there saying, like, you probably can't handle it truthfully unless you've done your serious homework behind it. But if you're just someone that's like, I've heard people talking about Bitcoin and maybe I should own some, you probably sold during that, most likely, because you're like, I can't handle this shit. This is going down. I don't know why. And guess what? If you held 3 days later, it wouldn't have, like, it's back at basically what you bought it at. And it's like,
dude, yeah, that'd be brutal.
yeah,
That's why education's so important. Like, you shouldn't be investing in things that you don't at least have a semblance of understanding about.
yeah, yeah. Well, for those that listen, appreciate it. If you can subscribe, like, follow on all social platforms and whatnot.
I think we're Gen B pod on everything.
Gen B pod.
We did a good job with that.
Yeah, consistency. Yep. If you could like, follow, subscribe, do it all, we appreciate it. But until next time.